Hello. My name is Tochukwu, and I want to take you on a journey to learn how to code. I implore you to come with me as we unravel in short steps the beauty of coding. Okay, so we're going to start with a variable. What is a variable and how does it relate with coding? How is variable used in Python coding? A variable can be regarded as a customized space or a container that houses some certain data. Just like you keeping some shoes in a shoe rack. We can see the shoe rack as the variable and the shoe as your data. Can we have some example of variable is written on the screen? As you see, I have here written my data set. This my data set is the variable, while the number 55 is your data. So I have this data and I store it in this variable, right? So if if I need this data, all I need to do is to give an instruction. I just type print my data set. I'm gonna have 55. Let me try to create another variable and show you what we should expect. Let's call it my data diary. And let's assign 2,500 to that. Now let us print. If you want to get your data and you want to send the command print, then you should have your variable stored in a bracket, like you can see on the screen. So I have my data diary. This is what I want to. I just need my data diary. I don't want to have my data set this time around. So I'm just gonna put a comment, an hash sign in front of that. So is that the purpose of that is to deaden that command. So this is the command that we're looking at right now. And so I click on run. Can you see I have the data that was stored in this variable? I have 2,500 as a response. So I have the data, I store it in a container as a variable. When I need the data, I call the variable. I don't have to call the data. I call the variable and I get data. Okay. There are certain ways to write a variable. There are rules in naming a variable when coding. I will start with the wrong ways of naming a variable when coding. Number one rule is do not start with a number or an integer. Say, for example, I have 1, my data set. What am I going to expect if I use that as a variable, as a name of the variable? Let's see what happens if we have that. I have 1, my data set. Let's say that is equals, let's say we store in that variable 45. Okay, let's try to run that and see, okay, now, and see what that's gonna give us. Let's call it out. We say print, we have our bracket, then we have 1, my data set. Let's see what that's gonna give us. Can you see? There is an error. It says invalid decimal literal. That is the error. So the arrow is pointing to this place, and that's drawing your attention to the variable name, that something is wrong with that. So when naming a variable, you don't start with a number. Okay, Let's go on to the next one. When naming a variable, there shouldn't be space in between multiple words. No space in between multiple words. For example, I call this my, then space, then data, then space, then set. Let's see if that's gonna work. Let's put the test. And then I go print my data set. Go with let's click on run. And see there is another error. So that's another wrong thing to do. The first thing, you don't have a number before the variable name. The second rule to remember, you shouldn't have spaces in between multiple words of your variable. The next thing to remember is that you shouldn't have an hyphen in between multiple words in a variable name. Let's see how that's going to, let's see the impact of having a hyphen in between words in a variable name. Let's try to run that. There's an error again. Cannot assign to expression here. Maybe you meant this is an error. So the problem is with the name of the variable. It's not correct. So those are three things to avoid when giving a name to a variable. Okay. Now we're gonna head on to the right way to name our variable. You can end the variable name with an integer. For example, my data set. Let's see what that, let's have an example of that. If we assign 45, we assign this data to this variable, and we need the data, yeah, print, and then we have this, and then, okay, let's run that and see what it's gonna give us. Can you see? Here we go. It worked. Our code was working. So that works. You could have a number at the end of multiple words in a variable, but you shouldn't have a number at the beginning of multiple words in a variable. Next thing to look into is we cannot have an hyphen in between multiple words in a variable, but we can have an underscore as seen here. My underscore data underscore set underscore. Let's replace this with that and see if it's gonna work. You have this, and let's run that. Let's change the data that we have in there so that it doesn't appear like it's the same thing. Let's run this. Can you see 57? That worked. That worked. So we can have a variable with that has multiple words and that are separated by an hyphen. So the next is you can have multiple words written together. You could have multiple words written together, something like this. This is my data set. These are different words, right? And we could have them written together, and that will be acceptable way of naming a variable. Let's see if this is gonna run. Can you see it worked? It did work. Now we can have multiple words written together with, but having the first word, the starting letter and the first word as a small case, as seen here. Let's see how that's gonna work. Let's assign a different data so that we can see the effect of what we are doing. Can you see? It worked. It worked. Okay. Now we can have different words with the first letter of the first word having a capital letter. That is called a Pascal case. If it starts with a small letter, it's a camel case. If it starts with a capital letter, then it's a Pascal case. And that's what we have here. Let's change the data and see if it's gonna give us what we have in there. And let's run this. Oh, we're not having what we, okay, I didn't change this. Everything has to be the same thing. That's one thing with coding. It's very sensitive to each letter in whatever you're typing in. So you have to ensure that everything is correct. Let's run that. Can you see? It did work. It worked. It worked. So what to avoid is not having a number in front of your variable name, not having, if you have multiple words as your variable name, not having space in between those words, not having hyphen in between those words. That's not going to, it's not going, that's going to give some error when you're trying to run your code. Also, right ways of having your variable name, having your words merged together, having your words, if your variable name is a multiple word variable name, you could have the words separated by an underscore, and you could literally write the words together, merged together. You could have the first letter of the words, you could have the first letter of the words having being a small case, and you could have the first letter of the word being a capital, being a, yeah, be written in capital case. So yeah, that was a short one. We just talked about variables, and we also talked about what variables are. They are, we see them as containers that house the data. So I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching and learning something about coding. Uh, you could drop your questions and contributions on concerns. I'll be happy to read them and respond to them. Have a great one. Bye.